Useless underpaid garbage, that's what she is. Those were the exact words Sarah heard her husband Mark whisper to his mother from the hospital hallway. He called her a deadbeat and said he would divorce her publicly on his birthday party. Sarah didn't confront them. She went home silently, keeping the pain to her chest. And in 72 hours, Mark will serve the divorce papers at his own birthday party. Publicly, but here is what he doesn't know. Sarah will sign them with a smile, and at his most important board meeting, the wife he called garbage will meet face to face with him, and the most shocking thing will happen to him. So sit back and hit that like button so the algorithm can push videos like this to you more. So let's begin. Sarah was a high school English teacher. She'd been one for 9 years. Her salary was $42,000 a year, and she was proud of it. Every semester, she watched kids who couldn't read at grade level walk out of her classroom quoting Shakespeare. She graded essays at midnight and bought classroom supplies with her own money. Mark used to call it admirable. Now he called it embarrassing. Mark had been unemployed for 6 months. He'd worked in mid-level marketing before the layoffs hit, and since then he'd been looking for the right opportunity. That's what he told people at parties. What he didn't tell them was that Sarah had been paying the rent, the utilities, the groceries, and his mother's hospital bills. She came home every night to an empty apartment that smelled like takeout containers and stale air. Mark would be on the couch, scrolling through LinkedIn with the TV on mute. She'd ask him how his day went. He'd grunt. She'd make dinner. It was a Tuesday when everything shattered. Sarah had just finished a parent-teacher conference that ran late. She'd promised Mark's mother, Linda, that she'd stop by the hospital with soup. Linda had been in and out of treatment for months. Something with her liver, the doctors said. Mark visited her every other day, but he never stayed long. Sarah drove to the hospital with a thermos of chicken noodle soup on the passenger seat. She took the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallway smelled like disinfectant and old flowers. Linda's room was at the end of the hall, door half open. Sarah heard voices before she reached it. She stopped. Mark's voice was low, conspiratorial. "I'm telling you, Mum, I can't do this anymore." Linda's voice was weaker, scratchy. "You've been patient, sweetheart. Anyone can see that." "Patient?" Mark laughed bitterly. "I've been a saint. She's useless, an underpaid garbage collector in a blazer." Sarah's hand tightened around the thermos. The heat burned her palm, but she didn't move. "You deserve better," Linda said. "You always have." "I know." Mark's voice hardened. "That's why I'm doing it at the party, publicly. Let everyone see what kind of deadbeat I married." Sarah's chest tightened. She felt the air leave her lungs. "The birthday party?" Linda asked. "Mark, are you sure?" "I'm sure. I already had the papers drawn up. She'll sign them in front of everyone, and then I can finally move on with my life." Sarah turned. She walked back down the hallway, past the nurse's station, past the elevator. She took the stairs. She sat in her car for 20 minutes, staring at the thermos in her lap. Then she drove home. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She opened her laptop and made a phone call. What Mark didn't know was that Sarah had already made that call 3 days earlier. 3 days before the hospital hallway, Sarah had been sitting in her car after school. The parking lot was empty except for the janitor's truck. She'd just gotten off the phone with the landlord, who reminded her that rent was due in 5 days. Mark hadn't contributed in 4 months. She scrolled through her contacts. She stopped at a name she hadn't called in 8 years. Harry Omilana. Her finger hovered over the screen. She pressed it. The phone rang twice. "Sarah." Harry's voice was calm, surprised. "Is that really you?" "Hi, Harry." 8 years. He paused. "You okay?" "I need advice," she said. "Legal advice." There was a long silence. "Where are you?" he asked. "School parking lot." "Can you meet me tomorrow? Downtown, Cafe Mara." "You remember it?" She did. "I'll be there," she said. She hung up. She sat in the silence of her car and stared at the dashboard. That had been 3 days ago, before the hospital, before she heard Mark call her garbage, before she knew he was planning to divorce her in front of 60 people. Now, driving home from the hospital with the soup still warm in the thermos, Sarah replayed Harry's voice in her head. She thought about the years before Mark, The years when she'd been sharp, ambitious, hungry. She'd met Harry in grad school, both of them getting their MBAs, both of them talking about changing the world. They dated for 2 years. It ended when Harry's father got sick and he had to move back home to run the family business. They'd promised to stay in touch. They didn't. Sarah met Mark a year later. He was charming, attentive, safe. He didn't ask her to be ambitious, he asked her to be comfortable. She chose comfort, and now, 8 years later, comfort was calling her garbage. Sarah pulled into the apartment complex. She turned off the engine. She sat in the dark. Then she grabbed her phone and texted Harry. "I'll tell you everything tomorrow." He replied immediately, "I'll be there." The next morning, Sarah stood in front of her classroom, teaching The Great Gatsby to 30 half-awake juniors. Gatsby believed in the green light, she said, pointing to the projector screen. He believed in the future. But what destroyed him wasn't the dream. It was his refusal to see the truth. A student in the back raised her hand. "Miss Carter, do you think Daisy deserved him?" Sarah paused. "No," she said quietly. But Gatsby didn't deserve what happened to him either. Sometimes people just make bad choices. The bell rang. The students filed out. Sarah erased the board and checked her phone. One new message from Mark. "Picking up the cake for the party today. Don't embarrass me in front of my friends." She stared at the text. She didn't reply. She grabbed her coat and headed downtown. Cafe Mara sat on the corner of 5th and Laurel, sandwiched between a bookstore and a law office. It was the kind of place that served pour-over coffee and had succulents on every table. Sarah walked in at 4:15 p.m. Harry was already there, sitting in the back corner. He stood when he saw her. He looked older. Lines around his eyes, a few grey hairs at his temples, but he still had the same steady presence. "Sarah." "Harry." They didn't hug. They sat. Harry ordered black coffee. Sarah ordered tea. "You look tired," he said. "I am." "What's going on?" Sarah told him. She told him about Mark's unemployment, about the bills, about the hospital hallway. She told him about the divorce papers and the birthday party. Harry listened without interrupting. When she finished, he sat back and exhaled slowly. "And you want to make sure you're protected," he said. "I want to make sure I'm prepared," Sarah corrected. Harry smiled faintly. "There's the Sarah I remember." He pulled out his phone and opened his calendar. "I made some calls after you texted me," he said. "There's an opening on my executive board. Chief Strategy Officer. It's been vacant for 2 months. Sarah blinked. "Harry, I'm a teacher. You have an MBA you never used. You're sharp, methodical, and you've been managing a budget on $42,000 a year while supporting a grown man. That's more strategic thinking than half the executives I know." Sarah stared at him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Harry looked at her for a long moment. "Because you called," he said quietly, "and because 8 years ago I let you go without a fight. I'm not making that mistake again." Sarah felt something shift in her chest. "What's the timeline?" she asked. 2 weeks, Harry said, "right after his birthday party." Sarah nodded slowly. "Okay." Harry reached across the table. He didn't take her hand, but his fingers rested near hers. "Let him have his party," Harry said. "Let him think he's won. And then we'll show him what losing actually looks like." Sarah looked at Harry's hand. Then she looked at his face. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet," Harry replied. "This is just the beginning." Sarah went home that night and found Mark on the couch. He was watching a basketball game with the sound off. "Hey," she said. "Hey." He didn't look up. "Do you need anything?" He sighed, annoyed. "Yeah, a wife who makes real money." Sarah stopped in the doorway. She turned to look at him. He was still staring at the TV. She nodded. She went to the kitchen. She made herself tea. She sat at the table and graded essays until midnight. Mark never came in to say goodnight. 3 days later, Mark's mother called. The phone was on speaker. Sarah was folding laundry in the next room. "Did you get the invitations printed?" Linda asked. "Yeah, Mum. 60 people confirmed." "Good. Make sure everyone important is there when you serve her." Sarah's hand stilled on a towel. "I will," Mark said. "Trust me, everyone's going to see exactly who she is." Linda coughed, then recovered. I'm proud of you, sweetheart. You're finally taking control of your life. Thanks, Mom. Sarah folded the towel. She placed it in the basket. She walked into the bedroom and closed the door. She texted Harry. He's moving forward with it. The party's in 4 days. Harry replied immediately. Good. Let him. 2 days before the party, Mark came home with news. He walked through the door grinning, holding his phone like a trophy. I got it, he said. Sarah looked up from the stove. Got what? A consulting gig. 3-month contract with a firm downtown. They want me to start Monday. He was beaming. That's great, Mark, Sarah said. He walked over and kissed her on the forehead. It was the first time he'd touched her in weeks. See, he said, I told you I'd land on my feet. Maybe you should have had more faith. Sarah smiled. You're right, she said. I should have. Mark went to the living room and started texting people the good news. Sarah turned back to the stove. She stirred the pasta. She said nothing. The next morning, Sarah met Harry again. This time, it wasn't at a cafe. It was at his office. Omilana Industries occupied the top 12 floors of a glass tower downtown. Sarah took the elevator to the 42nd floor. The receptionist greeted her by name. Ms. Carter, Mr. Omilana is expecting you. Sarah walked down a long hallway. The walls were white marble. The floors gleamed. She reached the corner office. Harry stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city. Come in, he said without turning around. Sarah stepped inside. The view was breathtaking. You've done well, she said. Harry turned. We've done well. My father built the foundation. I just kept it standing. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sarah sat. Harry sat across from her. I finalized the contract this morning, he said, sliding a folder across the desk. Chief Strategy Officer. Salary starts at $220,000. Benefits, stock options, full executive package. Sarah opened the folder. She read the first page. Her hands trembled slightly. Harry, I don't know if I'm ready for this. You are, he said. You've been ready. You just forgot. Sarah looked at him. What if I fail? Then you fail with a safety net, Harry said. But you won't. I know you. Sarah closed the folder. She looked out at the city. She thought about Mark on the couch. She thought about the hospital hallway. She thought about the word garbage. When do I start? She asked. Monday, Harry said, the day after the party. Sarah nodded. Then I'll be here. Harry stood. He walked around the desk. He extended his hand. Sarah stood. She shook it. Welcome to Omilana Industries, Ms. Carter. Thank you, Mr. Omilana. They both smiled. The night before the birthday party, Sarah and Mark packed for the venue. Mark had rented a private event space downtown, exposed brick, string lights, open bar. It cost $3,000. Sarah had paid for it. She folded a black dress into her overnight bag. Mark was on the bed, scrolling through his phone. Can we talk? Sarah asked. About what? He didn't look up. About us. About what happens next. Mark finally glanced at her. What happens next is I move forward, with or without dead weight. Sarah sat down on the edge of the bed. If you don't want to do this publicly, we can handle it privately. Just us. No audience. Mark laughed. Why? Embarrassed? No, Sarah said calmly. I just thought you might want to keep this between us. Mark put his phone down. He looked at her like she was a stranger. You don't get it, do you? He said. Everyone needs to know I'm not the failure here. You are. You're the one who couldn't keep up. You're the one who settled for a $42,000 a year pity job, not me. Sarah held his gaze. Okay, she said. Okay, Mark repeated, confused. Okay, Sarah said. If that's what you need to do, then do it. Mark stared at her for a long moment. Then he stood up. Good. At least you're finally being realistic. He walked out of the room. Sarah sat on the bed. She pulled out her phone. She opened her messages. She typed one word to Harry. Confirmed. Harry replied immediately. See you Monday. Sarah put the phone down. She looked at the black dress in her bag. She zipped it closed. Tomorrow Mark would serve her divorce papers in front of 60 people, and she would sign them with a smile. Because the audit was almost complete. And when it was over, Mark would realize that silence was never submission. It was strategy. The venue was perfect. Exposed brick walls, Edison bulbs hanging from black iron fixtures, and a bar that stretched the length of the back wall. 63 people showed up. Mark's college friends, his former co-workers, a few distant cousins, and his mother, who sat in a wheelchair near the cake table. Sarah arrived 20 minutes after Mark. She wore the black dress, simple, elegant, forgettable. She blended into the crowd. Mark was at the center of the room, holding court. He wore a grey suit that Sarah had bought him 2 Christmases ago. He was telling a story about his new consulting gig, gesturing with a whiskey glass. People laughed. Someone clapped him on the back. Sarah watched from the edge of the room. A waiter offered her champagne. She declined. At 8:47 p.m., Mark tapped his glass with a fork. The room went quiet. "Hey everyone," Mark said, grinning. "Thanks for coming out tonight. Means a lot." People raised their glasses. 34 years old today, Mark continued, and I gotta say, this year's been a journey. A few people chuckled. I lost my job. I questioned a lot of things. But I also realized something important. He paused for effect. Life's too short to stay stuck. The room murmured in agreement. Mark reached into his jacket. He pulled out a manila envelope. "Sarah," he said, scanning the crowd. "Where are you, babe?" Sarah stepped forward. The crowd parted. She walked to the front, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Mark smiled at her. It wasn't warm, it was triumphant. "I want to thank everyone for coming," Mark said, looking at the crowd. "Today isn't just about celebrating another year. It's about celebrating new beginnings." He turned to Sarah. He held out the envelope. "I think it's time we both admitted this isn't working." Sarah took the envelope. The room was silent. She opened it. She pulled out the papers. She read the first page. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Her name at the top. Mark's name below it. She pulled a pen from her purse. Mark's smile widened. Sarah clicked the pen. She signed the bottom of the first page. She flipped to the second page. She signed again. She closed the folder. She handed it back to Mark. She smiled. "You're free, Mark," she said quietly. "I hope you find what you're looking for." Mark blinked. He hadn't expected her to be calm. He'd expected tears, protests, something. Sarah turned to the crowd. "Enjoy the party," she said. She walked toward the exit. The room erupted in whispers. Someone gasped. Mark's mother clutched her chest. Mark stood there, holding the signed papers, feeling like he'd just won a war. He raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he shouted. A few people raised their glasses awkwardly. Most just stared. Sarah pushed through the door and stepped into the cool night air. She pulled out her phone. She texted Harry. "It's done." Harry replied immediately. "See you Monday, 9 a.m. sharp." Sarah got in her car. She drove home. She packed 2 suitcases. She left her key on the counter. She checked into a hotel downtown. She slept better than she had in months. The weekend passed. Mark spent it celebrating. He posted photos from the party on social media. He tagged people, thanked them for their support. He didn't mention Sarah. By Sunday night, the post had 200 likes. Mark felt invincible. Monday morning, he woke up at 7 a.m. He showered, shaved, put on his best suit. Today was his first day at the consulting firm. He wanted to make an impression. He took the elevator to the 14th floor. The receptionist greeted him with a tight smile. "Mark Harrison?" "That's me." "Conference room C. They're waiting for you." Mark frowned. "Waiting for me?" "Yes, sir. Down the hall, last door on the right." Mark walked down the hallway. His shoes echoed on the tile. He reached the conference room. The door was half open. He pushed it open. The room was full. 8 people sat around a long table. And at the head of the table, wearing a charcoal suit and reading a document, was Sarah. Mark froze. Every conversation in the room stopped. The silence was surgical. Sarah looked up. She met his eyes. She didn't smile. A man in his 50s stood from the chair beside her. He was tall, grey-haired, wearing a navy suit that probably cost more than Mark's car. "Mark," the man said, "I don't believe you've met our new chief strategy officer." Mark's mouth opened. Nothing came out. The man gestured to Sarah. "This is Sarah O'Malana," he said slowly. "My wife." Mark's coffee cup slipped from his hand. It hit the marble floor. It shattered. Brown liquid spread across the white tile. No one moved to clean it. Mark's knees buckled. He grabbed the edge of the table, his vision blurred. Sarah stood. She walked toward him. Her heels clicked on the floor. She stopped 3 feet away. "Mark," she said calmly, "your consulting contract has been terminated. Effective immediately." She slid a folder across the table. It stopped in front of him. "You have 72 hours to return all company property." Mark's hands trembled. What is this?" Sarah tilted her head. "This is what happens when you underestimate people." Mark looked around the room. Every face was stone. He looked back at Sarah. You can't do this." "I already did," Sarah said. Harry stepped forward. "O'Malana Industries owns 60% of this consulting firm," he said. "We acquired it 3 months ago. Ms. O'Malana flagged your contract during her onboarding review. She noted several concerns." Mark's face went pale. "Concerns?" Sarah crossed her arms. "You lied on your resume," she said. "You listed a degree you never finished. You claimed credit for campaigns you didn't lead, and you billed personal expenses to company accounts at your last job." Mark's throat closed. We also reviewed the severance agreement from your previous employer," Sarah continued. "The one that includes a non-compete clause you violated by taking this position." Mark staggered backward. "Sarah, please." She raised a hand. "You taught me something valuable in that hospital hallway," she said. "You taught me that silence isn't weakness, it's strategy." She looked him in the eyes. "You called me garbage, but garbage gets collected, Mark. And today, I'm collecting what I'm owed." Mark opened his mouth. No sound came out. He tried to stand straighter. His legs wouldn't support him. Sarah turned to Harry. "Mr. O'Malana, please have security escort Mr. Harrison from the building." Harry nodded. "Of course, Ms. O'Malana." 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. They walked toward Mark. "Wait," Mark whispered. "Sarah, wait." Sarah sat back down. She opened her laptop. She didn't look at him again. The guards took Mark by the arms. They led him out of the conference room. The door closed behind them. The room remained silent for 5 full seconds. Then Harry sat down. "Well," he said, "shall we continue with the quarterly review?" The other executives nodded. Sarah opened her notes. "Let's begin," she said. Within 48 hours, the collapse was complete. The consulting firm didn't just fire Mark. They blacklisted him. His name was flagged in every HR database they had access to, and O'Malana Industries had access to a lot of them. By Wednesday, Mark had applied to 14 jobs. By Friday, he'd received 14 rejections. Most didn't even send a form letter. They just ghosted him. The ones that did respond cited concerns raised during reference checks. Mark called his former boss at the marketing firm. The call went to voicemail. He called again. Voicemail. He tried LinkedIn. His message was read and ignored. His professional references had evaporated overnight. By the end of the first week, the apartment became a problem. Mark came home Thursday evening to find an eviction notice taped to the door. Notice to vacate 72 hours. He ripped it off the door and read it twice. The lease was in Sarah's name. She'd been the primary leaseholder for 3 years. Mark was listed as an occupant. Sarah had contacted the landlord on Monday morning. She'd paid the lease termination fee in full. She'd requested Mark's removal from the property. Legally, she had every right. Mark called her. The call went straight to voicemail. He texted her, "Sarah, please, we can talk about this." No response. He texted again, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean what I said." No response. He called 17 times over 2 days. Every call went to voicemail. On Saturday morning, a locksmith showed up. He changed the locks. Mark's belongings were packed into garbage bags and left in the hallway. He loaded them into his car. Except the car wasn't his either. The lease was co-signed by Sarah. When she withdrew her financial support and notified the leasing company of the separation, they ran a credit check on Mark alone. He failed. Repossession notice, 48 hours. By Sunday night, Mark was sitting in a budget motel off the highway, $49 a night. Torn carpet, flickering lights, a vending machine that only took exact change. He sat on the edge of the bed. He stared at his phone. 0 notifications, no calls, no texts, no emails. He opened his banking app. The joint account had been drained, legally. As part of the divorce settlement, Sarah had withdrawn her contributions. She'd been the primary earner for 6 months. The account was frozen pending court review. Mark's personal credit cards were maxed out. Most of them had been tied to Sarah's income verification. When she removed herself as a guarantor, his credit limits dropped. Then the cards were suspended. He had $214 in cash. That was it. He Googled his own name. The first result was a video. Man divorces wife publicly at birthday party. What happened next? Will shock you, 4.2 million views. He clicked it. It was a TikTok compilation. Someone had filmed the entire party. The speech, the envelope, Sarah signing the papers, Sarah walking out. The comments section was brutal. He thought he did something. She's a queen. Imagine divorcing someone publicly and then losing your whole life. Karma's real. This man really thought he was the main character. Mark closed the laptop. He lay back on the bed. The ceiling had a water stain shaped like a question mark. He stared at it for hours. His mother stopped answering his calls. The first time, he thought it was a mistake. The second time, he left a voicemail. The third time, Linda texted him. "You did this to yourself, Mark. I can't help you." He called her. Voicemail. He drove to the hospital. The nurse told him Linda had checked out 2 days ago. "Where did she go?" Mark asked. "I'm sorry, sir. I can't release that information." Mark stood in the hospital parking lot. He had no job, no apartment, no car, no wife, no mother. He sat on the curb and put his head in his hands. A security guard approached. "Sir, you can't loiter here." Mark stood. He walked to the motel. Meanwhile, Sarah stood in Harry's penthouse office. It was 6:30 p.m. on a Friday. The city stretched out below her, lights flickering on as the sun set. She held a glass of red wine. Harry walked in, loosening his tie. "Long week?" he asked. Sarah smiled. "Productive week." Harry poured himself a glass. He stood beside her at the window. "Any regrets?" he asked. Sarah looked out at the city. She thought about the hospital hallway. She thought about Mark's voice calling her garbage. She thought about the years she'd spent making herself smaller so he could feel bigger. "Only that I didn't walk away sooner," she said. Harry nodded. They stood in silence for a moment. "You know he's been calling," Harry said. "I know." "You going to answer?" Sarah took a sip of wine. "No." Harry smiled faintly. "Good." Sarah turned to him. "Thank you," she said, "for all of this." Harry shook his head. "You did this. I just gave you the platform." Sarah looked back at the city. "Still," she said, "thank you." Harry raised his glass. "To new beginnings." Sarah clinked her glass against his. "To new beginnings." They drank. The city lights spread out before them like a constellation. Sarah felt lighter than she had in years. Back in the motel, Mark sat on the bed. He opened his laptop one more time. He Googled Sarah's name. The first result was a Forbes article. New CSO Sarah Omilana brings fresh vision to Omilana Industries. There was a photo, Sarah standing in a conference room, arms crossed, smiling confidently. She looked powerful. She looked free. Mark closed the laptop. He stared at the water stain on the ceiling. He replayed the birthday party in his mind. The envelope, the signatures, her smile. He'd thought he was freeing himself. Instead, he'd freed her. And now, sitting in a $49 motel room with $200 to his name, Mark finally understood what Sarah had been doing all along. She hadn't been silent because she was weak. She'd been silent because she was building a case. And when the case was complete, she'd delivered the verdict without mercy. Mark lay back on the bed. He closed his eyes. The ceiling fan rattled above him. He had nothing left. No job, no home, no family, no future. Just a motel room and a lifetime of regret. So here's the question I'll leave you with. Was Sarah wrong for staying silent? Should she have confronted Mark in that hospital hallway? Or was the audit, the cold, calculated patience, exactly what he deserved? Because Mark had every opportunity to treat her with dignity. He chose cruelty. He chose arrogance. He chose to humiliate her publicly. And Sarah chose to let him, not because she was weak, but because she knew that silence wasn't submission. It was strategy. She let Mark serve the papers. She let him feel victorious. And then, when he thought he'd won, she showed him what losing actually looked like. No screaming, no threats, no drama, just consequences. Drop your answer in the comments. Do you think Sarah went too far? Or do you think Mark got exactly what he deserved? And if you think the quietest voice in the room is sometimes the most dangerous, hit that like button. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't rage, it's precision.